Hi everyone. My name is Jeff Sullivan, and I am super excited to be here with you today to talk a little bit about one aspect of igniting our potential. You see, one of the challenges that we have is this problem when it comes to self-confidence, this imposter syndrome, this tendency to overthink things. And so, what I want to talk today with all of you about over the next 20 to 30 minutes are three simple and easy steps you can take to master your mind so that self confidence is unshakable. And this imposter syndrome is never a problem for you ever again. And I really have some great news for all of you because all that stands between you and igniting your full potential and really getting rid of any of this self doubt are three simple statistics. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about those statistics in just a moment. But first, I just want to talk a little bit about what it means to ignite our potential. Right? This is a topic that I'm so happy that Gail has invited me to speak on, along with a lot of other noted experts. Right? Each person sharing a little bit from their own background about these things that can help us really begin to ignite that potential and get that rocket ship, right? And so that we can all achieve liftoff in our life and get that rocket ship off the ground finally, right? Well, when I think about how this whole potential thing works, I often think about right. I go back to my misspent youth because I spent a lot of time watching television when I was younger, right? Watching television and playing with action figures. What can I say? But one of the things that I always watched were cartoons. And in the cartoon, they had this sort of villain character, right? This villain character, he would have this great big rocket and he had it set up because he was going to blow up, right? He was going to do something dastardly to, the good character in the cartoon. And this rocket had this big long fuse on it, and the villainy character would go over and he'd light the fuse, and then it would just burn out. And then the villainy character would have to go over and light the fuse again, and burn out again, and he'd go over again. Now, in the cartoon, right, every time they went over there, he ran the risk of something happening, like either a rock would fall on him or some trap door would open, something crazy. But in our own lives, right, this is kind of our experience when it comes to achieving liftoff in our life and in our business. Right? It's this start and stop phenomenon going on, right? We just get kind of a little bit started with the ignition and then it goes out. And then we got to do it again and it goes out. And this is the cycle. And it's a frustrating cycle and it wears us out and it leads us to burnout, right? If you're like, 56% of entrepreneurs, right, they're actually experiencing burnout. And the reason is often because of this particular, phenomenon that happens, this ignition. And in that process, we're always lighting the fuse, and that fuse is so long, the rocket never takes off. And so our full potential is never unleashed out into the world. Now, why is that? Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about that here in just a moment. But first, let me talk a little bit about myself, my background, and what it is that I do and that type of thing, right? Because while it might look like I'm here pretty successful, right? I'm doing the thing I love, which is talk to people about how they can master their mind and build that unshakable self-confidence, right? It always hasn't been that way, right? Okay, so this is me, right now, right? I'm pretty easygoing, a really positive type of person, right? Actually, tend to informally refer to myself as a possibility artist because I tend to create possibilities where there aren't any, where there haven't been any before, right? This is me now, of course. Of course, it wasn't always like this, right? In fact, it was much different. I basically hated my life, right? I here's what I was dealing with, right? The old me was just really barely surviving. I was struggling. I was painfully shy. I was chronically depressed and I was anxious, right? I had to actually take a cocktail of medications just to get through the day, right? And when I'm talking about being anxious, I'm not talking about kind of garden variety anxiety when you got a little too much coffee to drink or a little you had a little too much caffeine. I'm talking about the kind of anxiety that can actually land you in the emergency room, not once, but twice in the same day. So it was pretty terrible and awful for me in this process. But, right, something changed. Something changed for me. And I went from being someone who was barely surviving to someone who is now fully thriving, right? Here's me on the stage, delivering a talk, one of my talks on how it is we can actually begin to manifest and really express our full potential. As I like to say, unleash our potential. And here's me with, noted author, speaker, and activist, coach, teacher, everything, Marianne Williamson, right? So, and here is me, right? Just a few of the accomplishments that I've had recently. We recently, my morning meditation group celebrated that 10th anniversary. And I have a group where I founded called Grow. And that group, well, I actually co-founded the group, but that particular group, right, we had 3,000 people at one time. And it led to me hosting events, and it led to me writing a number of blogs. Right? It says here, 4,000 blog posts. And I actually took some of those blog posts and I actually have now put together some manuscripts for a couple books. One of them is called A Guide to Guiltless Growth. So I'm working on those manuscripts, getting them out there. Oh, yeah. And I became a featured author in multiple bestseller James Malinchek's book, Live Abundantly. Right. So here's that book right here. And here's me in there. Right. I have my own chapter in the book. This was a dream come true, right? Because in addition to be this spiritual entrepreneur who helps those entrepreneurs who, excuse me, let me back up here. In addition to being a meditation and mindset expert who helps spiritual entrepreneurs, right, be massively productive and achieve ridiculous profits and be absolutely on fire with their purpose, right? I am an aspiring writer, aspiring author. So I've written many things, and just to get my my work published is one of the great highlights of my life so far. So, right. So you might be asking, well, how did you do this? How did you actually go from this person who hated their life, right, to someone who was barely surviving to someone who is now fully thriving? How did you do that, Jeff? Well, remember those 3 statistics I talked to you about? I learned to deal with those 3 statistics. Now, what are those 3 statistics? You're probably asking. The first one, 53%, we are only present 53% of the time, right? And I would say that is on a good day when we're not stressed out, when we're not worried, when we're not agitated or irritated. Statistic number two, 95%. 95% of the thoughts that we think today are the same thoughts we thought yesterday and the day before that. And number three, now this is the kicker, folks. 80% of the thoughts that we think are negative thoughts about our circumstances, about other people, and most importantly, about ourselves. So if we are someone who, for whatever reason, have not been able to ignite our potential, the reason is often very simple. It's because we are caught in a negative feedback loop that feeds over and over again on ourselves, all those automatic negative thoughts that are always running through our mind, that are creating negative feelings, that are reinforcing negative thoughts, that are bringing about negative moods. And this is just getting more and more ingrained into the neurophysiology of our brain and our body, and it becomes even harder to move out of. So, what do we do? How do we handle this problem of all the negative thoughts, of all the negativity, of the fact that we're not really that present in our life? Because the present moment, my friends, is the only moment in which we actually have capacity to make creative choices and change things in our lives and in our business. So, what do? Well, there's really three simple steps I'm going to talk about today that you can begin to immediately put into your life, and that is going to absolutely activate and ignite in a very powerful way your full potential so that you can finally achieve liftoff in your life. So, what is that first step? Well, I've already sort of talked about it a bit, but the first thing you have to do is you have to develop self-belief, right? Self-belief. And not just ordinary self-belief, but absolutely unshakable self-belief, right? Kind of like the guy in this photo, right? A self-belief that can take impossible and actually make it possible. Right? See, one of the challenges we often have when it comes to self-belief is we confuse it with self-confidence. Right? Self-confidence is something that we gain from our experience, right? It's gained when we develop a particular competence in a particular field of activity, right? We do something again and again, and then that leads to a level of confidence. But when we have self-belief, we're willing and able to go into new areas of our life. We're able to move into these growing edges of our lives and able to be with the kind of insecurity, the uncertainty, and this tendency that we're going to experience repeated failures again and again and again, right? We're able to do that because we have a powerful, unshakable self-belief, because we know without a doubt that if we just keep with something, that impossible thing soon becomes inevitable. The outcome becomes absolutely inevitable. Now, how do we do this? Well, the thing we want to do is we want to begin to look at in our lives, right? Look at all the sort of limiting beliefs that might be out there that might be holding us back. Now, when I'm talking about looking at them, I'm not talking about just thinking about them. Right? That thinking about them is one thing, but when we tend to think about them, it's just kind of a hazy, kind of a vagueness about it. What I want you to do is take and write down any self-limiting belief that comes to mind in the moment. So maybe take about, maybe 5 minutes, write down all those limiting beliefs, right? Because my bet is you don't really see clearly how it is that these limiting beliefs are impacting your ability to master your mind and ignite your full potential, right? Because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about giving ourselves the capacity to actually master our mind. And the first step, as I mentioned, is this step of self-belief. Now, one of the other things that we can do besides writing down all the different limiting beliefs that we have that are likely holding us back and moving us from self-belief into self-doubt is we want to become a risk taker. We want to take risks in our lives because when we learn to take risks again and again and again, we become comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's really important because then we develop the self-belief to go into any circumstance, regardless of how uncomfortable, regardless of how awkward or how self-conscious we feel. We have developed a capacity to believe in ourselves that is absolutely unshakable and that can endure that kind of uncertainty, that kind of insecurity, emotional insecurity that can show up when we're moving into these new areas. And if you, number two is related, right? Because one of the things that challenges us when it comes to self-belief is our self-talk, right? For most of us, the self-talk, if we actually look at the things that we're saying to ourselves, we'd probably be shocked at how cruel, how harsh, how overly critical we are in our messaging towards ourselves. I can't do this. I'm not up for this. I don't think it's possible for me. I'm just no good at this. Oh, I'm not that person. What was I thinking? This is crazy. On and on and on. And remember what I said, right? 80% of the thoughts that we think are negative and much of all of this self-talk is related to those 80% of negative thoughts. And so we really want to learn to recognize when we are adopting negative self-talk. One of the ways that we do this is, well, we get harsh with ourselves, like I already mentioned, but what we share with ourselves isn't actually accurate. Like, I'm no good at this. I'm not good at being, let's just say an entrepreneur as an example. I'm not good as an entrepreneur. Well, is that actually true? Now, surely there are certain skills that you have already that make you a good entrepreneur. Right now, there are other skill sets that you probably haven't yet fully developed, and those are the skill sets that are holding you back. But you're not recognizing and you're not acknowledging the degree to which you are already skilled and the talents and the abilities that you already possess. Instead, you are generalizing and you're taking what's maybe a specific circumstance, right? I'm not good at this particular area, and you're generalizing. I'm not a good entrepreneur. I'm not a good business owner. I'm not good at igniting my potential, right? This is a common trend that we have uh, when we're talking about self-talk. And another thing we do is we tend to exaggerate what it is that we're experiencing. Right? Oh my God, this is a disaster. We get very emotional, and in that emotional feeling, we jump to conclusions about how bad a circumstance is, and we tend to over dramatize and overemphasize what is exactly happening. And then this leads to a host of that negative self-talk. Instead, what we want to do is learn how to recognize, right? As I already mentioned, we want to recognize the specific areas where we're challenged in whatever skill set we're trying to develop, right? I'm trying to be an entrepreneur. I'm not that good at the tech piece, right? I'm really good at the presentation piece, right? I can come up with very creative ways of talking about what it is I do. I can come up with really these great hooks, but where I'm challenged is this tech thing. I really don't get it. And when I'm on video, I kind of like get very self-conscious, and I'm just not good on video, right? So that would be a way of pointing out the specific aspects of what is that's an accurate that is probably an accurate statement, but the fact that you're not a good entrepreneur, that is a generalization. And remember what I said about overemphasizing. We want to qualify our language rather than saying, oh my God, this is a disaster. Walk that statement back. Oh my goodness, this is a bit frustrating. This is a bit upsetting. It's a little bit upsetting, right? Because when we message that to ourselves, those messages actually help to minimize our emotional reactions to what's happening, what's going on. So that's number two, self-talk, right? And it really layers on top of number one, self-belief, right? Because so much of our self-belief is influenced by our self-talk. But there's another really important piece that we want to keep in mind if we want to really master our mind and be much more present than that 53% of the time that I mentioned. And that is the ability for self-acceptance. We really need to learn how to accept ourselves and accept ourselves in a particular way, non-judgmentally, unconditionally. So regardless of our flaws, regardless of the things that we think are wrong about ourselves or that we need to improve, we're going to accept those flaws and those areas of our lives where we think that something might be lacking, where skills are underdeveloped, where we're not as successful as we'd like to be. Because one of the things that this helps us do is recognize the ways that we actually are amazing and remarkable. Because so often we don't want to accept the amazing talents, the amazing abilities, our own inner genius that we each and every one of us possess. We dismiss it, we minimize it. And when we have this capacity for self-acceptance, we have this ability then to be with our total selves, and all of that potential then can be fully unleashed. Now, self-acceptance, along with these other two uh, steps that I mentioned, right? Self-belief and self-talk can help us be far more present in the moment. And why is it important to be present in the moment? Well, as I mentioned already, right, it's the only moment in which we can actually uh, meaningfully change the circumstances of our life. But it also does something equally remarkable. The present moment is like a magical place. When we're in the present moment, we don't really have a problem, right? Look at your immediate moment. And when I'm talking about the present moment, I'm talking about this immediate moment right now in this very instant. What besides the thoughts that you're thinking and the feelings that you're feeling is wrong in this moment, is missing or lacking? You see, what we can discover is that when we're in the present moment, we're outside of those stories that create all the worry and all the anxiety and all the guilt and all the shame. Because worry and anxiety comes from anticipating the future and creating all these stories about what is going to happen. And all the shame and guilt comes from thinking too much about our past experience. But being in the present moment does something else that's really remarkably amazing. And that is this: it allows us to experience flow states. And when I'm in a flow state, my life just flows along, right? When I'm in the flow, as I like to say, I steal the show. I steal the show because I become magnetic, right? People are like, oh my goodness, what is this person about? What are they on? How can they be so endlessly enthusiastic and optimistic and positive? And how is it that their life just continues to get richer and fuller? And they just feel like this person who is so full up with gratitude and joy and abundance. Well, because when you're in a flow state, you effortlessly perform your best and you feel your best, right? I once heard a story about a 14-year-old boy. This 14-year-old boy actually beat experienced 19 and 20-year-old swimmers in a race. Now, how'd he do it? Right? He knew something that those other guys didn't know. The other guys, they swim straight across the lake to the shore on the other side, right? Shortest distance between 2 points, always a straight line. Well, this young boy, he knew out in the middle of the lake there was a strong current. So he swam out to that strong current. That current took him over to the shore. He got there minutes before the other guys, and he exerted far less energy, right? What he did was he recognized there was an invisible current out there that would take him along. And what I want people to recognize is that there is an invisible current in your life that will naturally take you to that next level of success in your life. You see, so many of us, we're just continuing to grind and grind away, right? We're working super hard, we're struggling, and we're just barely surviving. Right now, we might be successful, but even if we're successful, this is a recipe for burnout. But what if we can find that flow, right? Find that invisible current in our own life that will naturally, like that boy who naturally carried him over to the shore, it's naturally going to take us to that next level of success. Well, if this sounds like something of interest to you, I want to let you know about an offer I have just for attendees of this Ignite Your Potential Summit. And that's this. My 6-figure flow activation session. It's a half an hour individual assessment. And in that assessment, we will look at how well you are able to gain and maintain these high energy flow states, which I already mentioned, allow us to actually perform our best and feel our best, right? When we're in a flow state, our life is just flowing along in this effortless fashion. We use far less energy, and we're super creative, we're massively productive, and we learn in just half the time. I mean, it's almost like a magical state of being. So I want to help you learn to access this flow state so that you can finally begin to ignite that potential and get that liftoff you're so looking for. Now, this particular 6-figure flow activation session, it's typically $350 value, but today I'm offering it to anyone who is a participant in this summit at a complimentary price of $0. That's right, $0. So if you struggle with trying to get that potential unlocked, I invite you to take advantage of this 6-figure flow activation session, because what I want for you is to be as successful as you possibly can, but not in a way that you have to strive, but in a way that you're actually thriving and that your life is actually flowing along. And you have caught that current, and it's naturally taking you to that next level of success. Because as I mentioned, so many people out there need the gifts that you have to offer. They need you in their lives and you to show up as your fullest self. Okay, so thanks so much, everyone, for being here today. I hope you found this particular session, Mastering Your Mind in 3 Easy Steps. I hope you found it valuable and useful. Bye for now.